So we're going to be talking about the case of Christopher Benoit. So Chris Benoit was born Christopher Michael Benoit on May 21st of 1967. He was born in Canada. Chris was noted to be a loner while growing up. He was to himself, but he did love wrestling as a child and as a teenager. In his preteens and early teens, he really didn't focus much on social life. He really was just focusing on his training. He was a part of the Calgary Stampede Wrestling, and he also trained at the infamous Hart family mansion. He noted that later on in his career that he owed everything to his trainer, Stu Hart. But from statements from his dad and just other people that knew him, Stu Hart was not his primary trainer. From 1988 to 1997, he was married to a Martina Benoit. And in 2000, he married Nancy Elizabeth Benoit. She was born on May 17th of 1964. She was a pro wrestling manager and model, and she was about 3 years older than Chris. She was born in Boston, Massachusetts. At first, in Chris and Nancy's relationship, it was all good. But then it seemed like they started bringing the worst out in each other. They would argue, they would fight, and people sometimes just didn't want to be around. It's like they brought the worst out in each other. The same year that they had got married, they actually had a son. His name was Daniel Benoit. He was born February 25th of 2000. So today he would have been about 25 years old. In 2005, Chris actually lost one of his best friends. Eddie Guerrero died of acute heart failure in 2005. He died as a result of heart failure with contributions from steroid use and alcohol use. This really shook Benoit to his core. He just really wasn't the same after. He would write to Eddie in his journals, and he would often just pay tribute. But as time went on, Eddie wouldn't be the only friend that him and Nancy would lose tragically. He would also lose Owen Hart and other members of New Japan that he had previously wrestled with. In 2006, he decided to take leave from the WWE and just focus on his family and getting his body back together. While doing all this, he was heavily using painkillers and steroids. After he returned from his 3-month leave, I think it was about 3 months, everybody noted that under this newfound good vibe that he had, it seemed like it was something much darker. He became paranoid. He thought that somebody was out to get him and his family, and he just would not let Nancy and Daniel live. June 19th was his last match, and I think it was June 24th when he was supposed to face CM Punk on ECW. On June 22nd, it was a normal day. He had ran some errands, called some friends, and he actually called Bob Holly to come visit the house. Bob declined, and he had noted that he thought that would have been a time where he would have loved to, or Chris would have loved to spend with his family. But Hollywood later revealed that he was actually regretful because maybe if he would have came to the house that day, maybe things would have been different. So June 22nd, like I said, was any other day. They ran some errands and they actually had a cookout. The police actually got a call from the Benoit residence later on that evening asking for the emergency line to the Fayetteville police. It was a non-emergency line that was not used or ever called. Then the neighbor of the Benoits had been called twice with no answer and no voicemails were left. This was likely Nancy calling because she knew that something bad was about to happen. So on the 22nd of June, Nancy was in the room upstairs watching TV when an argument ensued between her and Chris. This argument ended with Chris bounding Nancy's hands and feet and ultimately strangling her. That next day, on the 23rd, he actually called the exact same neighbor, and he basically told the neighbor that Daniel wouldn't be able to make it to his horse riding camp practice because he had food poisoning. And Nancy had it also, and this was likely a ruse to not make the neighbor go to the house and try to check on anyone. Later on that day, he did the unthinkable, and he also murdered his son. Basically, what I'm saying is, I hope that was done so Daniel didn't have much pain during his death. On the next day, on the 24th, Chris Benoit, like I said, was actually due to be on the flight to go to a WWE or ECW pay-per-view. I don't know if ECW was a brand of WWE because that's not my time. But anyway, before ultimately calling the talent people or the higher-ups of WWE to basically tell them that he would not be showing up, he actually had rescheduled his flight for later that day. He had called a bunch of his friends just talking, and he also had called Eddie Guerrero's nephew, Chavo. Chavo noted that on the phone, Chris was acting very strange, and he told him that he loved him, which he thought was very weird because he really never said that. And then on that day, Chris would go on to commit suicide. Now, as I said earlier in this case, he died. Well, he had very sufficient steroid and painkiller use. And this is my personal opinion and my opinion only. I feel like that there's no way that nobody, no higher up in WWE knew that there was steroid use on the roster at that time. Yeah, this was time of the early 2000s and the early 90s or whatever, but nobody knew. I feel like somebody had to know, because Eddie and Chris were not the only two who were using steroids in the business at that time. I know that professionals, health professionals and sports professionals just didn't think that they got their stature and their muscle by just hardcore working out, because you could really tell that Chris Benoit was using steroids heavily. You could literally tell. After this case happened in 2007, WWE changed their health policy and it was no steroid or anything used. So literally what you see in WWE now is probably, I'm gonna say allegedly, is from wrestlers just straight working out. I'm not gonna lie, how big Brock Lesnar is, I think he is also using steroids. There were even some, talks about John Cena also using steroids. I don't know, and I'm not gonna comment on that. But after this tragedy, like I said, Chris was not put in the Hall of Fame, and his profile is not on WWE's encyclopedia. I feel like his profile should have been at least kept, only because, there are still clips of him in WWE, from ECW. Everybody's always going to know that he was a part of it. His name will always be attached to pro wrestling in WWE. So taking his profile and deleting him, Vince trying to delete him from the company, it's just not working in their favor. And I want to know why he wasn't at least kept on the encyclopedia when there has been multiple sexual misconduct violations, sex trafficking accusations from people themselves against the owner or the co-owner or whatever the fuck he is, Vince McMahon. I just feel like them trying to permanently delete him was kind of unnecessary in a way. But, regardless, what happened. It's a tragedy. And I just pray that Nancy and Daniel are resting in paradise.